Greetings! My name's Joe Bob, and I'm very peeved, and welcome back to Crimson Gray, Dusk and Dawn. Last time, we narrowly avoided murdering someone, and then watched a new thing about some other person murdering a bunch of people, and now we sort of left off on a cliffhanger as to what we're gonna do about it. I think this seems it might be a tad bit too paranoid. Forget about for now, might be... Do we search for more information or do we just forget about it? That's tricky. I guess we should search for more information. Why not? We need to learn more. Whatever happens, it can't hurt to get more information. I mean, it can, but it probably won't. I suppose that's true. And it's not like we were overworked anyway. Talk to Erin, maybe, and check out the computer lab. Yes, let's do it. Though she didn't feel an intense need to learn more, Lizzie was happy to go back to old habits and prepare, even if it was for an event that was unlikely to have a direct impact on them. She glanced at John with concern, hoping that all their activities hadn't been too much for him, but he still seemed fine and smiled back at her. As she fell asleep, Lizzie tried to ponder what this would mean to them. All she was sure about was that she wanted to face it at his side. Several days later, more information had come out and everything was far less clear. The fate of the Wuornos incident were overwhelmed by rumors, or the facts of the Wuornos incident were overwhelmed by rumors, theories, and other chaos that muddled any potential message. Lizzie was absolutely certain in her interpretation, but obviously she was keeping that to herself. The girl's name was common knowledge now, and her face was represented by both a very normal-looking yearbook photo and her grin from the video. The exact order of events when she had killed 12 of her classmates was still argued over, adding to the conspiracy theories. It was unclear why she had done it, and none of the evidence offered struck Lizzie as correct. She was actually a little curious what the girl's reasoning had been, but ultimately, it didn't matter. At the moment, Lizzie was writing up some of her thoughts in her notebook. The incident had set her imagination on fire, so she'd used the notebook more lately, but she let John see much of what she did, and they'd been able to talk about it, which amplified the soothing effect. Now, though, she was finished and feeling restless. Lizzie glanced at the clock and got up to pace a little. John was currently at the computer lab, another part-time job he'd taken to try to reduce their debt. This one was also usually easy. This one was also usually easy, he said, but tonight, allegedly, he was going to be playing games with some other people. Huh. Okay then. What a job. I mean, imagine getting paid. Imagine doing a job where you get paid to just hang around on a computer and play video games with people. I couldn't imagine. Including Erin, which made her a little uncomfortable. She knew it was irrational, but she hadn't pushed too hard, but John knew she didn't like it. He'd promised that soon he'd start withdrawing a little more to spend time with her, but hadn't specified exactly when. Lizzie decided that it was time to go visit him. Not just to check on him, but because she might as well see what everyone was interested in. Games didn't particularly interest her, and John hadn't played many because they were expensive. Not that expensive. I mean, you could always pirate. That's what I do. But there was a group on campus setting up something called a LAN party. She made her way across campus at speed toward the lab, and to her surprise, she wasn't anxious. John was having fun, he would be happy to see her, and things would be fine. There was no threat, not here. Inside, she found things a little different than expected. Each person had a separate computer. Maybe she had been thinking of consoles, with everyone together on the same couch. Yeah, yes, with split screen and all that crap. Blah. I gut myself before doing shit like that. Then again, I'm not a big fan of consoles in general. This was reasonable, and seemed like the kind of thing John would like. Yes, because he's a member of the PC Gaming Master Race. What a Chad. Though almost everyone was utterly fixated on the screen, John looked up and smiled when he saw her. She immediately moved to stand behind him, one hand on his shoulder. The screen seemed to be from the point of view of someone running through corridors carrying a gun. There were other numbers, presumably the statistics related to the game. Oh, this is the game? Yeah, it's fun playing over a LAN, but I doubt I'd want to play too often. That's normal, right? I mean, there are a lot of more important causes in the world, but you can't be focused all the time or you'll just end up useless, you know? I think I've had his voice drift a bit, whatever. Lizzie could be focused all the time, or at least she should be, but she nodded. It was true for John, at least. And in one of the ways she needed to protect him. Sorry if I'm distracted. After the match, He cut off as someone else appeared from around a corner on his screen, abruptly moving his mouse and hitting keys much faster. Lizzie found herself briefly concerned for his avatar, but fortunately it was the other player who collapsed, the little human image spurting blood. Hee, that's not very realistic. That prompted a strange eyebrow from Aaron. Perhaps you shouldn't be talking about your experience with this sort of thing. Well, it is a game. The winner is the person who kills the most people? More or less. More or less. The timer is... Whoa! Yeah. Once again, the game sucked up his attention, so Lizzie stopped distracting him and just stayed behind to watch. If she could play the game, would John like that? Lizzie watched his hands and the gameplay. Reaction time seemed to play a part, and she'd be good at that, but the actions necessary to move and fire seemed very artificial. She wasn't sure she'd be able to adjust to them. I know that feeling. Of course, she wouldn't want to play against John, even if his character was just a little soldier that didn't look like him. She also wasn't sure she wanted to play with this group. A few were staring at her with a look that made her set her teeth on edge. Only John got to look at her that way. Things went well until John's avatar came under heavy fire. Abruptly, the screen pulled back and she saw the little figure collapse in a shower of blood. John had been killed? He winced and muttered to himself. Raw hatred surged through Lizzie as she realized that one of the people in that room had killed him. He popped back up a second later, but she barely noticed, scanning the other chairs. Was there any way to tell which username connected to the person who had killed him? But as things went on, John killed them back several times. He got killed again, and the surges of hatred faded. It was just a silly little avatar after all. John was fine. If she could kill people in real life and do no harm, would she? The idea kind of excited her, but she decided not to explore it for now. That's an interesting... It's an interesting thought, to be sure. You could go around getting people down, stabbing them to pieces, chopping them up, putting them in stew, and all that. Perhaps even yourself chopping your own limbs off and cooking them up to eat. And all of this with no harm, no consequences. It's an attractive thought, isn't it? Anyways. Before too long, the match ended. If she read the screen right, John did well, in the top third of players. Considering he had less time for games than many other people, she was very proud of him. giving him a quick hug from behind. He swiveled around in his chair to face her, smiling. You just came to watch, I take it? Do you want to play? Oh, Jesus. I just coughed up some phlegm and thought I coughed up blood, and I realized, no, I'd just been eating something orange. That was a bit nice. Oh, I don't know about that. It doesn't seem quite like my sort of thing. Do you know there are seriously people blaming the Wurnos incident on violent video games? Yeah, there always will be. Shaking his head, Aaron swiveled to face them. Not just a few crackpots either. I hear a lot of people saying this is because of violence in our media, calling for all kinds of societal change, so long as they're superficial. Yeah. Utterly ridiculous. There's always going to be people like that saying like, oh, there's violence in this video game, it's going to corrupt the youth, or oh no, there's incest in a game, oh no, pornography is going to corrupt people's minds. All that nonsense. You'd think it would have been... You'd think when the, the religious bozos that were most of the ones propagating this fell out of favor, this would have subsided, but nope. That's the uniparty for you. The other side, the people that oppose them, well, they're, as they say, here comes the new boss, same as the old boss. They just found their own retarded reasons to say the exact same things. Yeah, well. This is exactly why I'm gonna run for president. And I'm gonna run for president, I'm going to wield... I've got a whole plan, I'm gonna wield like all the might that I... all the executive might that I have as president to force through a whole bunch of just common sense anti-corruption methods. Just cut a swath through the entire political sphere, with sparing no one and nothing. But I'm not quite old enough to run for president yet. I think you gotta be 35, which means which is still gonna be like 2.5 years or so. Oh well. And I'll have to, you know. Anyways. I don't think you're going to overthrow the status quo with a revolution, Aaron. But obviously I agree, all that campaigning against violent games is misplaced. I don't know, man. I think we're past the point where incremental change can accomplish anything. You saw how the pharmaceuticals just spun this incident to give them even more power. But it was a Koitek town. Who knows how drugs might have made the situation worse. Lizzie, that's who would know. Possibly. The two of them went back and forth, arguing mildly. It interested Lizzie a little, but it was more abstract than she preferred. She drew up a chair and got involved to prevent some of the unpleasant people from coming closer and trying to talk to her. It seemed they were taking a break in between matches, several people taking the time to go to the bathroom or get snacks from the bathroom. Oh, how would you do that? For the most part, it seemed like a decent group, so Lizzie didn't mind John spending time with them. The break didn't last long, not nearly long enough for John and Aaron to resolve their disagreement. John glanced at her, but when Lizzie smiled encouragingly, he participated in the next match as well. As she watched, Lizzie got more of a natural sense of the game, but that actually took her out of the experience. In the game, there was no way you could tell if someone was behind you, except like a sound, you know? And no sense for the environment or easy way to keep tabs on the scenario. And the blood effects really were sort of silly. Not realistic at all. Yeah, well... that sort of adds to the fun, you know? Yet she felt a little intrigued. John had mentioned that computer graphics were always getting better. If there was a game that looked more realistic and let her use knives instead of guns, she wondered if it could be fun for her. Not the same as killing people, but... yeah, I know what you mean. When they finished the next match, John got up to stretch while Aaron glanced toward them again. You're really watching intently. You sure you don't want to play, Lizzie? No, that's okay. I don't really like guns. Fair enough. This kind of crazy violence isn't for everyone. Think you misinterpreted her words there slightly. Finished stretching, John glanced over at her, for a moment just considering, then he nodded. I think I've had about enough for today. You want to head home, Lizzie? Okay. You two take care, okay? They left the lab and walked back together, taking their time. John seemed to be contemplating something, so Lizzie just kept pace alongside him and let him think until he was ready. Aaron is a good guy, but I don't think we're ever going to agree on some big things. Everything we were talking about with changing society, you mean? Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll see the FDCA change and the whole industry will be transformed. But I kind of doubt it. History would have needed to go differently years ago. I agree with you, John. But maybe that's fine. He'll go his own way and organize protests and things. I'll see if I can't do more within the system. Maybe both approaches are necessary. They'll take us in completely different directions, though. Do you mean you aren't upset that I'm uncomfortable about Aaron, are you? He looked at her, slight surprise in his eyes. No, not at all. I was trying to say the opposite. It looks like our choices in life will mean that we spend less time together regardless. Ah, I understand. I'm glad you're not upset. Just thoughtful. It's strange how choices you make at the beginning of life can take things in such different directions. Well, you know. Honestly, it'd be stranger if it didn't. Imagine if choices we make so early on had no effect at all. Or only slight effect, you know? Like choices in video games, which so often just don't really matter. Not the early ones, at least. You know, might get slight differences in the story or dialogue or whatever, but it's all the same in the end. What a terrible way to live life that would be. It's like, is there another version of me who follows Francesca's path and works for the FDCA? Another where I join protests? One where I forget all about it and just take some other job? Interesting. And it was interesting, but Lizzie didn't like the idea. She liked this John, the one with her. She liked herself and the singular relationship they had. John noticed her slight frown before she could think to hide it, but Lizzie decided that was fine. Don't worry, I like this John too. That's why I made him. Or I guided him this way. You seem troubled. I don't like thinking about other versions of myself. A Lizzie who never met you? Or somehow didn't love you? Or... I don't want to think about those. Yeah, neither do I. That's why I didn't go check out the other endings in the first game. Why would I need other endings, you know? You don't have to focus on the depressing possibilities. What about a version of you where we escaped Koitek entirely and just lived happily together? or a version where we went and slaughtered all of Koitek and bathed in their blood. That idea did bring a bit of warmth to her heart, even if it was a fantasy. But a moment later, Lizzie realized the true potential of the concept. She could always stay with her John and make the best decisions, but she could imagine all the paths not taken and enjoy them too. Just adding more facets to the relationship. I like that, John. I really do. I'm glad. I just want to say that even considering every possible future reality, I want to be with you in all of them. You smooth talker, John. Ah, you're making me blush. Ah. Lizzie latched onto his arm happily and squeezed him for just a moment. Me too, John. All the alternate reality Lizzies want to be with you too. Well, now we're getting into straight science fiction. The two of them explored that topic as they headed back, sometimes speculative and sometimes just silly. Lizzie was happy to discuss it, and brimming with happiness by the time they went to bed. There were so many other paths in life, but it would always be John and Lizzie. Lizzie and John. Forever. I can drink to that. Uh-oh. Lizzie had been having a good day until she went out to get their mail. It contained their usual financial statements from the college, which normally she looked at dutifully, but didn't particularly care about. Nothing was wrong, technically. Their account was in good order, and all the payments were as expected. What bothered her was that their debt had only changed by the usual amount. John had been working so much more. Shouldn't it have gone down? Unless he's saving up for something. Perhaps a ring? Or maybe just like an anniversary gift or something. But he didn't count on you being so perceptive. Or maybe he did. And he's waiting for you to think about it. To be sure she wasn't making a mistake, Lizzie went to find their previous statement, in a box with the others, since John was always so organized. Yes, everything was just as she remembered. Odd. Chewing on her lower lip, Lizzie began looking around their home, checking alternative possibilities. The cash she kept at home was about the usual. There hadn't been any expenses she neglected to consider, and no mid-semester textbooks. Then where had the money gone? Her first thought was a fear they had been robbed somehow, the second that the university was cheating them. But she discarded both of those quickly, as they would have had other consequences before now. That left the possibility that John was intentionally hiding something from her. Slowly sinking onto the couch, Lizzie chewed on one of her fingers and rolled her knife around her other hand in an exercise that was usually soothing, but not this time. There was a possibility that he wanted to buy something for himself. He hadn't had his own computer for the game. Maybe it was that. But if that was true, why wouldn't he have mentioned it to her? Did he think that she would ever deny him anything? It was possible that he was gathering it for some kind of emergency. Or even to leave? No, surely not. She couldn't live without him, and her John would never do such a thing. But if not, why? 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 Realizing there was blood trickling down her finger, Lizzie removed it from her mouth. She paused a moment, stilling her knife, then took a deep breath. So yeah, this is. I can very easily see where this is going. Let's ask John about it, not confront him about it. Don't want to be confrontational. Lizzie gripped her knife and firmly set aside all her doubts. Her John would never do anything to hurt her, intentionally. She got up and began preparing dinner for them, though her knife moved a little more forcefully than necessary. When she finally heard his footsteps, Lizzie eagerly dropped her knife and ran to fling the door open. Welcome home, John! My, you're in a good mood. She pulled him inside and into her embrace, which she returned warmly. Once they had the door closed behind him, though, Lizzie let some of her concern show. John, I hope this is just a silly fear, but I want to talk to you about it. Do you have some kind of financial problem? You know you could share anything with me, right? His eyes widened, then he gave a rueful smile. God, I'm sorry. I was planning a happy surprise for you, but I guess I should have known you might get worried over it. Surprise? The money from all the extra shifts. It's for a surprise? I've been saving funds for our wedding. Her heart soared. She had been right to trust him. Absolutely right. Though she didn't understand why he had kept it a secret, she was certain that he would explain, and of course her John would have a good explanation. See, this is what like, my god, it's so ridiculous. In so many stories, people just don't fucking communicate. And look how incredibly easy it is to clear up misunderstandings like these and not get into ridiculous rows if you just bother to just just communicate in a calm and reasonable manner. Seriously, this fucking relationship between a yandere and a morbidly depressed individual is by a lot of metrics a healthier relationship than most I see in stories. Yeah. To be fair, that's partly because it's me guiding them. Oh, John, that's wonderful. John moved further in and sat down, drawing her with him onto the couch. After all the unnecessary tension dragging her down, now she was elated. Though she gave John a huge smile, the way his eyes lingered on hers suggested that the tension was visible on her face. I've been planning this for quite a while. After high school, you were nervous a wedding would go wrong somehow, so I didn't try then. As time went on, you seemed less worried about it, but by then we already had our college debt. I started thinking about how I talked about money a lot, and I wondered if you wanted to get married, but I felt that you couldn't ask because of money, so I decided to save up a decent amount. Then I could ask you and show that the money would be no concern. Oh, you didn't need to be concerned about that, John, not at all. I'm just so happy. Let me know if you have concerns, Lizzie. I'm grateful you helped support me. But I want to support you too. Oh, a part of me wants to get married right away. We shouldn't rush. We should make sure everything is perfect. Yeah, that'll be something we can talk about. Actually, let me get the money. No sense keeping it in a packet now. Wait, let me hold you longer first. Lizzie threw herself at him cheerfully, and he was glad to hold her. She nestled against his chest, imagining their wedding. Soon, Lizzie realized that her imagination was only the beginning. The two of them could discuss all their wedding plans now. She pulled back and beamed at him again. So many decisions to make. Where do we start? Well, do you still want me to get down on one knee and propose? It, kind of feels weird given everything, but I wasn't sure if you'd appreciate the gesture. 3 years ago, I think I would have said yes. But now, I don't think it really matters. We both already know that we want to get married. And as for the romantic gesture? Hehe, I already have a lot of romantic memories, like you helping me clean up all those bodies. In a way, I suppose, him stabbing you with that syringe was as much proposal as you need. That got a chuckle from him, which has been her goal. She meant it, though. John wasn't like her, and he could have been scared. But he had helped her and accepted her, even after seeing everything she was capable of. Compared to that, the fantasy of him going down on one knee didn't seem to matter. Getting married, though. She still wanted that, and all the memories that went with it. Lizzie put her hand on his knee eagerly. Okay. You're probably thinking about all kinds of plans and details, right? How close are we? Well, that depends. It doesn't cost much to just get married at the courthouse, but I imagine you wanted more than that. The price of most weddings is ridiculous, but I've been looking into ways to avoid the worst costs. They inflate prices for weddings, you see? John explained everything he'd been considering, making it clear just how much research he had done. She agreed with him on almost everything. They didn't need a lot of stupid expensive things for their wedding, just the things that really mattered. Which quickly came down to a small list. I looked into renting a tux, but it was actually a little more expensive than I expected. Is the suit fine? I'm sure you'll look wonderful. But I assume you want a unique dress, right? Yes. It doesn't have to be expensive, but I want something that can remind me of the wedding. There are people in town that make dresses for less than I thought. I'll introduce you and you can choose whatever you want. Okay. She didn't need a fancy dress. In fact, the idea of choosing all the little details appealed less than the role the dress would play in creating their perfect moment. But it was such a nice idea that she didn't even mind having to talk to someone else about it. I remember you saying how pictures were important to you, so I've looked into photographers. It's more expensive than I thought, but I don't think we'll need them for long. No, probably not. John, we haven't talked about if we're going to invite anyone to our wedding. His expression became more serious, though not sad. He nodded slowly. Yes, we need to talk about that. Setting aside everything except what you want. How many people do you want at our wedding, Lizzie? 2! I'm guessing you don't mean the photog. All that matters is the 2 of us, John. We don't need anyone else. That does simplify things, and since we don't want much of a service, that means we don't need to reserve the venue for as long either. John, do you agree with me? How many people do you want at our wedding? He paused for a moment, but she didn't see any fear in his eyes. He reached out to take her hand, and Lizzie gave it an encouraging squeeze. Honestly, I wish we could have a few people, but right now there's no one I really want to invite. I mean, we have some friends, but... Lizzie considered thoughtfully, both his words and the implication beneath them. So, there's no problem for the wedding, but in the future, do you need more people? You'll always be the only one for me, Lizzie. You do know that, right? Of course, John. She embraced him again, beaming. In fact, she decided to just stay draped against him, while he did a quick total on a sheet of paper and showed it to her. So, this is our total so far. Pretty manageable, but we haven't talked about rings yet, which could be really expensive. Nope, I don't want any diamonds. Huh, really? I mean, the rings will be something we actually wear for a long time, and I figured diamonds are traditional. Diamonds are only valuable because of a monopoly. We learned all about it in one of my classes. They're the kind of thing that normal, stupid people think is special. We're much more special than that. Hard to argue with your assessment. Yeah, I mean, not only are they a lot easier to come by, not only are they a lot more common in the ground than people think, but also synthetic diamonds, which are literally identical to naturally formed diamonds because they're made and all that, are relatively speaking extremely cheap to produce. I should know. And all that. I mean, diamonds are really just goes to show how the value of a good PR campaign. Yes. Since John wasn't objecting, Lizzie hopped up and ran to get her notebook. She returned with it, flipping the pages rapidly to get the one she wanted. I remember that page. Is it actually about rings? Yeah. Yes. I didn't draw any designs, but I've been thinking about materials. At first I thought about using high-grade steel, but the thing about steel is that different grades are better for different uses. The idea of using nice steel was kind of nice, but I realized that it was the wrong material. Our relationship is much more durable than that. Smiling, John put an arm around her and sat back, just enjoying listening to her enthuse about the subject. For a while I was thinking about having tungsten carbide rings, because it has such a good hardness rating, but tungsten is brittle and impacts can break it. That's nothing like our relationship at all. So I decided that titanium might be the best after all. It's a little more common, but it'll be strong, and I'd be so happy to see us wearing them. It doesn't matter if it's common. What matters is that they're the rings we want. Titanium rings are fine with me. Also, titanium is much lighter, and while it probably wouldn't make do much difference, I don't want my ring to slow me down at all. You've obviously thought this through. Well, that seems better in all respects, because that means we don't need to pay nearly as much. In fact, we're pretty close to our total. Getting the reservation might be the harder part. That's okay. I can wait. She simultaneously wanted to be married right away, and wanted to be able to enjoy this anticipation forever. But one thing she had learned with John was that the anticipation of the thing often paled in comparison to the thing itself. So she was eager for the wedding. That just improved the anticipation, though. I bet you were in... I'd make a joke here about her anticipating his thing, but that would be crude. For the next several weeks, Lizzie was overjoyed. Even handling the minor details of the event was wonderful, to say nothing of the major ones. It all seemed to pass by in a rush, but she relished it and tried to capture every detail in her mind. The old woman who made her dress wasn't so bad, and helped Lizzie fill in the details of her vague fantasies. She loved what she saw, though given the schedule she wouldn't see the finished dress until their wedding day. Getting their rings turned out to be simpler. Just a visit to a jeweler's and a wait. Their rings were a perfect match, except for the size. Until the wedding, they each held the other's ring. Lizzie found herself clutching it in her hands often, smiling to herself. Focused on the wedding, Lizzie paid little attention to the news. It didn't matter. All that mattered was the two of them. Until one day when that wasn't true anymore. Oh fuck. Lizzie was returning home when she heard voices inside. She disliked that, but wasn't too far out of the ordinary. Speeding up to hear better, she realized that it wasn't anyone inside. It was the television. John occasionally had the news on while he worked, but it was uncommon. She most likely wouldn't even need to tell him to turn it off, so she opened the door with a smile on her face. Inside, she realized that this was not a normal situation. John had a textbook on his lap, but it was forgotten as he stared at the screen. Lizzie hurried to sit beside him and figured out what was going on. Has been approved for widespread use. Koitek representative said that the demand is likely to outpace supply, but the corporation will increase production in an effort to provide the devices at cost to government and educational institutions. John? What's happening? Congress rushed through an act in response to the Wernos incident. They're blaming it all on her, saying that increased measures need to be taken to prevent such people from killing anyone else. A hollow cold began to slide through Lizzie's body. She sat down beside John, but he provided no happy warmth. He was an ally against what she knew was coming. What kind of increased measures? Pharmaceutical lobbyists had their hands all over the act, so it's going to be increased medication. He cut off as the news anchor transitioned to something else, which proved to be Francesca Kelsey making a prepared statement. Though all our hearts go out to the families of those who died in the tragedy at Wernos, we must be careful not to take the wrong lessons from this terrible event. None of us will ever know what went through the killer's mind, and we still do not know all the facts surrounding the case. Furthermore, many of the suggestions show a troubling over-reliance on hormones and chemical markers, already a failing of many corporations. There was a danger of seeking simple answers instead of finding solutions that will... Her words dissolved into a meaningless hum. Lizzie knew that calm words advising caution wouldn't have any effect, not when others were panicking and demanding action. She felt slightly guilty for being suspicious of Francesca when she was on campus. What does the act actually do? They haven't talked about all of it yet, but it sounds like there will be increased funding for various measures designed to prevent violence, ostensibly. John took a deep breath, but his eyes were still calm. Lizzie nestled against him to provide comfort, but she knew that they couldn't change the facts of the situation. It sounds like they're reducing the requirement to move drugs through testing, including on younger populations. Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, we definitely need less requirements when they were already fucking. Goddamn, the bar was already so low it was in hell, but here you are, limbo dancing with the devil. Another channel had Kelsey on as a guest earlier, and she was saying it's basically the opposite of what she wanted for the FDCA. Is that what you were about to say earlier? No, that's not the worst part, at least not for us. The technology Koitek uses to detect hormonal balance has apparently been improved, and they're going to start distributing it more widely to detect problems where they occur, or so they say. Does he bear... Excuse me? Technology to detect hormonal... That sounds like a significant breach of privacy. Lizzie bared her teeth slightly, eyes narrowing. That technology had been what detected John's depression, made them give him that awful Paxatine. It had also accurately detected that she wasn't like other girls. If she had been tested in a social environment like this, who knows what would have happened to her. Jesus Christ, this world is even more dystopian than I thought. They've got using technology like that on random fucking children. As a matter of fact, Jesus Christ. I hate them, John. I hate them so much. I wish I could get rid of them, but... She gripped her knife tightly, but knew it didn't do any good. John nodded in understanding and leaned his head against hers. I know, but they rushed it through on the surge of popular appeal, and it's already done. Do you think they'll do widespread testing? Better test everyone? I don't think they can do anything without someone's express permission, but parents will probably get their children checked. There are still restrictions on medicating young children, but... Do you think it will come here? Probably not. Presumably cities will adopt it first. It'll take much longer to filter to rural areas, but it would happen eventually. Many things would be changing, and there was little they could do about it. I feel small. These events all happened so far away, without us being able to do anything. I prefer the last problem. I could decapitate that one. That at least got a slight smile from him, but the situation was obviously quite serious. It could be worse. It's not like society is going to change overnight. After all, the Wernos incident is still on everyone's mind, but they'll move on eventually. Does this change what you want to do? Should we do something different? No, I think we have to keep going on as we have. Finish college, then we can build our life together. He reached out to take her hand, and she gripped it back hard. I think I've seen enough for now. I don't know, I feel like we need to keep watching, but at this point it's just depressing me. I'll watch for you. You rest, John. I'll tell you if anything important happens. Are you sure? I don't want to make you shoulder it either. No, I'm happy to. Things might be bad, but I don't mind if I'm helping you feel better. Then I will take you up on that. Thanks, Lizzie. She helped tuck him to bed, kissed his forehead, and then headed back to watch late into the night. By the next morning, Lizzie was feeling discouraged, not just about the situation, but about the reactions to it. Everyone was so stupid. There were protests in support of the law, and protests against it. More protests that didn't seem clear on what they wanted except change. It was utter chaos, and yet the direction of all of it seemed to be downward. There was so much attention on everything, so little of it rational. According to the reports, some schools had even expelled students based on the idea that they might be a threat, even though they had no true grounds to do so. Lawsuits had already begun. All of it seemed so far away from their home and their life together, yet it loomed high and cast a shadow over her. She was grateful when she heard John finally getting up. He came out and gave her a quick kiss before sitting down beside her. She explained the basics of everything that had been reported, and putting it into words made things seem slightly more manageable, but it was still far from pleasant. John, do you think we need to call off the wedding? He looked into her eyes seriously for a long moment, not judging, just understanding. Eventually he spoke quietly. Would you prefer that? No, something might happen. I don't think there's any real risk, but I don't want you to be unhappy, Lizzie. I want our wedding day to be something you can remember forever, so if now is a bad time... I think it would be better to do it, to prove that Koitek doesn't dominate our lives anymore. It would make me happy, John, so happy. She stared into his eyes and realized that she was certain. She wanted nothing more than to spend the rest of her life with him. But she was afraid that someone would take him away somehow. Afraid of so many things. You tell me everything will be alright, John? I can't promise that. But I don't think there's any serious chance of something going wrong. She smiled fondly through moist eyes and nestled closer against him. I'm glad you said that. You don't offer any false hope. I don't want you to be sad, but I'm glad you never try to force things to be happy. Yeah. Just like all that time ago, back when he was locked up in her basement. Good times. Thank you? Please convince me, John. Tell me about everything and why we can have our wedding and I don't need to be afraid. John held her and began to speak, not making any grand promises, but just going over the situation. It all seemed so much clearer when he said it compared to the chaos of possibilities within her mind. Yes, things weren't perfect. Yes, there would be problems in the future. But with him by her side, Lizzie could hope that things would turn out well. All she needed to do was... Ha! I see. Trust him or trust him. Cute. Let's go with this then. That's a nice little thing to trip people up at the last hurdle. Lizzie held her John, and he held her. They would always have each other. Finding peace again, Lizzie gradually fell asleep in his arms. At long last, it was time for their special day. After all their preparation, it somehow felt simultaneously as if it couldn't be happening already, and as if she had been waiting forever. Soon they would belong to each other in another way. Most of her concerns about something happening to somehow interrupt the wedding had faded away, though obviously she had brought her axe. Of course. But with John's calmness balancing her, she felt as though things would be fine. Arriving at the location they'd picked out made it all seem so much more real. She'd seen the pictures, but actually standing on the grounds was an entirely different experience. The garden area at the edge of town did a lot of weddings, and it was certainly beautiful. High hedge walls made the garden seem separated from the rest of the world, and even the offices were picturesque. Though Lizzie wanted to go see the actual area where they would be married first, apparently things were still being rearranged following a wedding before them. Instead, they headed into the offices to do a little paperwork, which Lizzie got out of the way as fast as possible to focus on what mattered. And that is, of course, each other. After that, they had to part, going in separate directions to get dressed. Lizzie held her dress tightly as she was directed to one of the side rooms. She had tried it on a few times, but John had actually never seen her wearing it. "No, darling, get in here." An irritatingly young woman gestured for Lizzie to come. At first Lizzie was angry about her presence, but she knew it wasn't easy to get everything on her dress done properly on her own. Reluctantly accepting that necessity, Lizzie got fully dressed. Seeing herself in the mirror, she was quite pleased with the effect. The positive feelings were only slightly dampened by the assistant making comments about her. They were compliments, but Lizzie didn't care about her. She only wanted compliments from John. Unfortunately, the time it took for her to put on her dress wasn't long enough for the garden to be ready. The assistant left, leaving Lizzie to pace idly. She considered getting out her axe to see how she would look with it. She had a feeling she would like the look. Hopefully John would like it too. That brought to mind naughty ideas that made Lizzie giggle to herself. Sooner than she had expected, the assistant returned. I bet you look quite ravishing in that dress, covered in blood, holding an axe. And by ravishing, I mean he'd want to ravish you. Now? Not yet, sorry. How much longer will it be? Sorry, the previous ceremony went long. Just as soon as everything is cleaned up, you'll be able to step right in. I see. I'll go talk to John then. What? You can't let him see you before the wedding? Lizzie considered that tradition for a moment and decided that it was dumb. But the other woman seemed very serious about it, as if such superstitions made all the difference. Why not? It's bad luck. You don't want to get your married life started off with the wrong foot, do you? Lizzie paused, considering all the factors in her mind, then gave the woman a flat smile. I'm going for a walk in the garden, then. Don't get close to any of the workers. Ignoring her, Lizzie headed out. The grounds really were pleasant. She was glad they picked this location, but her purpose was not to go for a walk. Once she got out of eyesight, Lizzie circled back and made her way around the main building. Before they'd been split up, she'd obviously noted exactly where they'd taken John to wait. Comparing it to the map she'd looked up of the building, she could easily determine where his room met the outside wall. She didn't see anyone until she saw him through the window. John was alone, sitting in a room much like hers. Though he looked mostly calm, she could see the tension in his hands as he clasped them together. Oh, he looked quite dashing. No doubt he was nervous about this too, and given her fears about this day, Lizzie had probably added to them, but she planned to reverse that trend very soon. Just not quite yet. Instead, she stayed outside the window, staring at him, just like she used to. The next time, she'd be staring at her husband. Lizzie was sure that her smile had become something that was not comforting to most, but it didn't matter. She knocked on the glass and John jumped a little, whirling to look at her. But when he saw her, he immediately smiled. After checking the window a bit, he managed to open it. Everything okay, Lizzie? Everything's fine. There was just an awful woman saying boring things, and I got tired of it. Before he could object, she pulled herself through the window. Normally it would have been effortless, but the dress made things a little more difficult. Fortunately, John offered her his hand, and she was able to get in somewhat gracefully. They say it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding. She walked past him and locked the door to the room. But I think that only applies to normal people. Brushing past him again, Lizzie lowered the blinds to cover the window completely, then turned to him with a smile. Would you like to see the bride? Really? Now? He glanced over his shoulder to the door, as if she hadn't just locked it. But he was smiling. After a moment, he turned back to her. You're beautiful, Lizzie. If you stay here, I don't think I'll be able to help myself. Oh, you'll help yourself, alright. Help yourself to her. She grabbed the front of his suit and pulled him to her. I don't want you to. Lizzie pressed herself against him, ignoring the clothes between them, feeling his body against hers. His hands automatically came to rest on her waist, keeping her there as he bent to kiss her. She eagerly kissed back. First simply and romantically, then after a while, slipping her tongue into his mouth. One of John's hands slid down, cupping her ass through the dress and pulling her harder against him. Needing more, Lizzie pushed against him until he had to take a step backward, his back against the wall. That felt good, but she wanted... John. I don't think I need to censor this. Understanding, he spun her around so that she was the one against the wall. Her veil fluttered with the movement, covering her face. Actually, I'm gonna make that the thumbnail. And for a moment, she could only feel him there, pressing her against the wall, his knees sliding between her legs. Yes, like this. His hand slid down, brushing over the silk of her dress and caressing her thigh. She eagerly raised it against his side, her leg partially wrapped in her dress and partially against the smooth material of his suit. John kissed her again, grinding his hips against hers a little harder. Lizzie moaned softly and pressed herself hard against him, even as he kept caressing her thigh through the dress. You have a lot of dress. Lizzie laughed gleefully, and fortunately John just smiled too. Her dress didn't have too large of a train, but it still took a lot of careful work to hitch the front end of it above her waist. John blinked when he saw she was only wearing thin lingerie below. I didn't want to wait to get changed after the ceremony, but I couldn't wait even that long. And yeah, this is probably when I'll start having to skip. Yep. For a moment, her head was as wide as the dress she wore. That's a good line. Okay. Okay, there we go. As glorious as it had felt, it was a little awkward immediately afterward as they struggled to right their clothes and remove any sign of what had happened. They both helped the other adjust, then smiled again. The achievement. Bachelorette party. Break wedding tradition. Quite so. That was a lot better than just waiting. Wasn't it? Then I'll see you soon, won't I? Look surprised. Lizzie climbed back out the window, making sure her dress was still in decent shape, then headed back to her room. The assistant grumbled when she saw a few things askew, but Lizzie just smiled at her demurely and said that she'd had a nice walk. In a few minutes, everything was fixed, and the preparations were finally done. The wedding was so soon, yet Lizzie wasn't nervous anymore. It was finally time. Lizzie stepped from the door and into the back garden, where there was a pathway of short grass lined with flowers. Normally there would be chairs filled with guests, but in their case it was empty. She let her eyes wander forward, wanting to drink it all in before she fully indulged. At the end of the pathway was an archway woven with white roses. The scene wasn't marred by many people, only a pastor and a photographer. Necessary evils. And then there was John, completing the image. Even though she had seen him wearing the suit not long before, it was completely different to see him standing there, waiting to marry her. He looked amazing. That was nothing compared to the look she saw in his eyes, though. He was looking at her as if for the first time, and the millionth time. His eyes filled with such love that it nearly broke her heart. It took all her self-control not to run down the walkway toward him, or walk down the runway. She made herself walk slowly, savoring the moments until she finally drew beside him. They stood in front of the pastor, but she barely saw the other man. They had spent a long time talking about their vows, but in the end they had gone with none. There was nothing they could say now that would match everything they had already promised one another. Besides, she doubted the pastor would appreciate her saying how many people she would happily murder for John's sake. He might just think you're being hyperbolic. With the ceremony simplified, it didn't take long. She ignored the words buzzing in the back of her mind, just staring at John until she heard the words that mattered. Do you, John Nichols... Oh, is that his name? Take Lizzie Doss to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Lizzie Doss, take John Nichols to be your lawfully wedded husband? Oh wow. What a choice. I better save and agonize over what I'm gonna do here. Really a big stumper, you know? I just can't decide whether you should live or die. Oh, I guess if you really have to pull a decision out of me, I guess we'll choose I do. Before the pastor could say anything about kissing the bride, Lizzie threw herself at John, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him fiercely. In that moment, everything fell away except the two of them. Nothing else mattered. She pulled back just slightly, staring into his eyes. She saw the past pain and sorrow there, yes, but she also saw hope and determination. She saw love that matched her own. When they moved apart, she took his arm for the sake of the pictures. But those no longer mattered. When they planned the wedding, Lizzie had thought that capturing this moment would be an important part of the experience. Now, she saw that it didn't matter at all. A picture she could never compare to the fact that she would always have this moment. Always have him. Forever. True ending. Oh, hang on. Shit. Boy. Oh. Oh, I guess it automatically. Hang on. Hold on. There we go. It's been quite a ride, hasn't it? Finally and truly, we leave them with their right and proper happy ending. You know, in the words of Da Vinci and Perturabo, that's what I'm here for, to leave them better than I found them. And just think of how we found them. They were two individuals, a morbidly depressed person on a path to self-annihilation, and an utterly empty woman with no one and nothing. And look at how we're leaving them. I don't know what else to say, really. This little follow-up game it wasn't quite as exciting as the first one, but I'm glad we found it. You know, it did a good job of, giving us an insight on Lizzie's thought process and expanding the world a bit, while also avoiding, overwriting the happy ending of the original game, and giving us an even more solid happy ending in the end. That's how you do a fucking sequel. Oh well. There's nothing more to be said now, is there? Nothing except this. As always, I have been Joe Bob, and I'm very peeved. And remember, dislike the video, unsubscribe if you're for some reason subscribed, and leave a nasty comment in the comment section down below. Fuck you all so much for watching, and sayonara, suckers.
You're gonna be okay, kid.